Herbert's 100 Harem. The sound of the dressing down was nothing short of awe-inspiring. Madame Stepanova had lungs on her and was letting people know it. There would be occasional pauses for breath, and that was when Sir Philip was adding to things himself. No one was impressed with some of the new agents, and there was talk of transferring them into basic training to get them up to speed, then seeing if they had any skills. Makes sense. After all, the mission had been the milkiest of milk runs. Put on disguise. Go to place. Do not talk about who you really are. Await further orders. A child could have done that. A trained dog could have done it. Instead, they refused both a physical transformation or a padded addition to their outfit, heavily compromising the disguises. They had successfully gone to the right place, thank God. But they had then proceeded to act so suspicious that a gang of drugged-up idiots had started to figure them out. Finally, they had acted on their own initiative in the worst way. Herbert had heard one of them mentioning cutting the head off the snake as a defense before himself, and Harriet had left the room to avoid the fallout of that distilled stupid. "So where did Ling pull the grenade from?" Harriet asks him, and he groans in response. "That bad? You remember those poof balls that she insisted were a proper part of any disguise?" "You're kidding. The only reason I let her out with those was that she insisted they were just bits of fashion. It was something that could be laughed at and help endear her to the gang." "Yay, apparently not. Why is it that the people trying to be smart are the dumbest of all?" Harriet moans. "Pride? It's a deadly sin for a reason." He replies before going quiet. "So," she says after a bit, someone turned on a sound-baffling device so that the dressing down continues without the outside world hearing it. He offers her his attention and she gives him an odd look. "Do you really not remember the incident?" If I focus and try to remember, then it's a blur. There are some hefty emotional bits, but that's about it. There is fear and panic and a falling sensation. Then at the very end there is pain as I hit the ground. But that's the most real bit of it. I then pass out and wake up in the hospital changed and with something that vaguely resembles what I saw in the dream, all but begging my forgiveness." So there's no fear or trauma? Watching the Alien movies is scarier by far, and at this point I mostly just see the mistakes they made in the special effects. Herbert answers with a shrug. "Aside from that little bit, I can't really remember. I've had nothing but positive encounters with the Zedin and Yaya races. There's nothing there that I fear. Even if one was actively hostile, I wouldn't be scared. I know them too well now. There's a crash as someone hits something, or is being hit with something. So, what's the craziest thing you did on a mission that you can tell me about?" "Story for a story deal?" Herbert asks her, and she grins and nods. "Great. Now what's the craziest?" "I was planting bugs to track a classified target and at a classified location when they returned home hours before they were expected, and I had to phase into the nearest wall to avoid detection. It turns out that there was a hidden door there, and they had what could be best described as a sex dungeon." Oh my God. Things got crazier from there because, as it turns out, there was a man whore who'd been hired for the night, and all I'd done was buy myself about 10 seconds, he says, and she snorts in amusement. Also, they were really close by at this point, so I couldn't risk using Axiom without arousing suspicion, so I had to improvise. Oh God. Now I was in my mission wear at the time. Dark blue to black bodysuit and dark gray visor to hide my eyes. Bandolier of gear, another of grenades, a sword and a couple of guns strapped to me with a boot knife. So all told, I had about 30 pounds of equipment and my own ass. I'm 175, so that's 200 plus. "You had to balance on something, didn't you?" Harriet asks, and both of them glance towards the room where the sound are conspicuously silent. They're being listened to. "Somewhat. You see, there's a technique to effectively wedge yourself into the corner made where wall and ceiling meets. It's a hard and exhausting technique, but a useful one nonetheless. It lets you get right the hell out of sight and get the literal drop on people in places without anything to hide behind. So I'm assuming you wedged yourself above the door, using the frame to make it easier, and then dropped down behind them to slip out. That was the plan, and doing that by itself is a hell of a lot of work. It's exhausting even in short bursts because you're putting a lot of pressure on muscles that aren't used to being pressured in that way. Of course. So a small crowd starts piling into the room. First is this tiny slip of a Tret kid that looks younger than I physically am. I mean, I won't give any more details, but suffice to say I had found out I was dealing with pedophiles and the entire mission was about to go to shit if I didn't get the hell out of there so we could catch the fuckers in the act. Herbert explains and the door cracks open a little. Surely you wanted to do something. Of course. I had weapons. I was armed, dangerous, and could easily have killed all of them and swung out with the kid on my back. There was that option, but that was the wrong option. Saving one person in the now would mean that more people later would be victimized. Herbert explains with his voice carrying a bit. You have to trust that your dispatchers know what they're doing when you're on a mission. Otherwise, you can get yourself and your team killed. Yeah, it's always horrible to be forced to do nothing like that. Well, I wasn't doing nothing. I was giving a contortionist and an acrobat a run for their freaking money, as a Nagasha paused half and half out of the door and I had to slowly worm my way around the frame, literally in grabbing distance from her. But that wasn't the problem, was it? The sweat of a human man is something they all pick up on. That's right. I was on a timer before my suit's ability to suppress my pheromones started to fail. I needed to get into a position where I wasn't going to be straining every second and overheating. Otherwise, there'd be no way I could hide around them. So imagine, if you will, there's something supremely disturbing about to kick off, and a freaking ninja, because I know my suit makes me look like a ninja and I don't care, is trying to slip away right above the head of a snake woman. By the time I was out of that room, I was cramping in places I hadn't even imagined and feeling filthy. That's when the second half of the group showed up and I dove into a cupboard. They posted a guard and I was stuck in that cupboard, listening to the most fucked up sex I had ever imagined and thinking very fondly of the explosive, ballistic, and sharp things I had strapped all over me. How long were you in there?
How long? Long enough to cramp nearly solid while praying for death, although near the end I wasn't sure if it was for mine or theirs. Herbert answers and Harriet lets out a few rueful huffs of sympathetic amusement. All right, I've spilled all I'm allowed to about that mess. What do you got? As you know, I'm infiltrating over a dozen different civilian intelligence agencies. Usually as a paper pusher, puts me beneath suspicion, puts all the information into my hands and no one questions it when I make copies. It's absolutely perfect. A job almost no one wants to do, and as such everyone's grateful to have me around. If I wasn't a lying bitch, I would have a massive social circle of deeply loving friends. And that's where the problem came in. Herbert spots and Harriet nods in amusement. Oh yes. You see, when you like someone you want to spend time with them, no matter how demanding their job or busy their family schedule is. So they took me bar hopping, or rather, they took me manhunting. Oh no. They went to a bar near the Dauntless, didn't they? Herbert asks, and Harriet nods, prompting an involuntary cackle. So I was surrounded by no less than 10 women I had only seen in the most respectable circumstances, and several of them are wearing tiny skirts and open jackets over micro bikinis and a huge amount of makeup. These are women I had respect for. Women I had actually liked despite the job. You can't help it sometimes. If you infiltrate into a society, you end up finding parts and people you like. And these girls that I thought well of were dressed like they were heartbeats away from jumping on the nearest man and dragging him away. And they dragged you to dress up like them too. Yes, I'm not going to tell you what I was made to wear, but
Suffice to say, it was really, really, really hard to keep a weapon and emergency recall beacon on me at the time. I had to get really, really creative. "Say no more, please," Herbert says with a grin, and she scoffs at the look on his face. Anyways, the natural punchline you've seen coming a mile away came to fruition. I won't tell you who it was with, but needless to say, with 10 girls as my hype team, I got to walk out of the bar with a man wrapped around me. He's part of my routine with the girls now to keep the disguise up. He's basically a weapon drop, and he's been getting some extra training. When it's done, you'll be allowed to request his name. But let me tell you, there are few things so embarrassing as to seduce one of your own for the sake of a job. Damn. Did you have a good time at least? Herbert asks her, and she snorts. That is something else I'll leave up to your imagination. Needless to say, though, I have a fascinating routine when it comes to that organization now. With my so-called boyfriend being a contact that I'm helping train as much rely on, and he's actually helping me infiltrate a great deal. But the girls are sensitive to certain details, so I have to do things that are just nuts to keep things going. He must be very attentive if you're not complaining about this at all. Yes, but that's not your business, not in the slightest. Fair enough. A lot of the dates I bring my girls on are coincidentally close to missions going off. I understand. Herbert remarks and glances towards the cracked open door. So, have the kiddies learned anything or not? The door closes and the sounds of a rant start picking up again. Highlights include a literal child with less than a year's experience in subterfuge. And meatheads improvising on the spot did better than you clowns. 20 minutes later, and a small crowd of shamed would-be spies rush out, and both Herbert and Harriet press against the walls to let them pass. The slam of a cane on the ground lets them know that Madame Stepanova is suddenly next to them and glaring after the thoroughly intimidated observers. Do either of you have any experience in teaching? No, Herbert says. I think I might have less. Harriet confirms and Madame Stepanova nods. Excellent. You're both qualified, Sir Philip says, walking up. Excuse me? Herbert demands. You're excused, Sir Philip replies, and Herbert groans at the joke. In all seriousness, you both are exceptional students, and if you can impart even a fraction of that to those individuals, then I would be most thankful. Sir, I have an absurd training routine augmented by Axiom and advanced technology. And I have taken advantage of my background as a secretary and the fact that I've been altered by outside forces to blend in with the local population. Exactly, give them some of that. Throw them into the water and make them swim. Throw them in the water, eh? Herbert muses before grinning. Great. One of Masterson's students is smiling. This is going to be absurd. I'm going to introduce them to my wives with no warning about their species, Herbert says, and Harriet's eyes widen at the idea. I'm so proud of you, Sir Philip says as Madame Stepanova does some fast research on Herbert to get up to speed. Although I advise you to disarm them first, otherwise there will be tragedy. Yes, of course. Actually, could all of you be there just to stop things from going too badly? Considering what these Zidane and Yaoya creatures are, you could not keep me away, young man, Madame Stepanova says as she tucks away her communicator with a smile. Harriet honestly expects the iron teeth. Excellent. A little meet-up with my co-workers, Herbert muses while struggling to keep a straight face.